Oh yeah. I'm ready for it, me like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Geordie Journo's back here at the Brandlin Arms in Gosforth, becoming our Saturday morning haunt, although we'll timestamp this, it is a Friday afternoon. Which
The Saturday show.
we're sticking with that?
No.
But yeah, our last video that we did, the other side of this room, we talked about the next time we're doing a video, we expect there to be plenty to talk about movement in the next week. Now July is underway and there has been. So
Yeah.
stuff to talk about. Anyway, on the transfer front, Newcastle getting things into gear. Thing is, as we speak now, no deals over the line confirmed.
No.
But
I
what's
thought
going
there
on?
would have been. I remember saying in the video that here this time last week that I thought this would be crunch time. There would be a deal completed this week, and there might well still be. I did expect it to be James Trafford, and I do believe my information is that they were very, very close this time last week. Hence why I said what I said.
Yeah.
But then there was a bit of a commotion over the weekend, a bit of to-ing and fro-ing. I think some social media activity led to Burnley slapping a couple of £1 million on and pushing things in negotiations. So I don't think they're quite there on that one, but I do think that one will get done. It just might cost them a little bit more than it would have before some social media activity the weekend.
Social media, man.
Social media costing Newcastle United millions. Anyway, on that, I think that will get done, like I say, and I think that'll be a really good addition. Alanga's kind of accelerated past that in many ways, though. Eddie Howe back in control, back at the wheel this week. Paul Mitchell out the door. See you later, mate. Eddie's the man.
Did he ever get in?
No, I don't know if he did. He kind of just had a foot in the door, didn't he? He was never.
Yeah.
He
Holding it ajar, but not really letting anyone in or out.
It's like when you let the Ben change the gear stick. Eddie let him put the indicator on.
Paul Mitchell told him how to drive.
I tried to tell him how to drive and failed miserably.
Yeah, okay.
Failed his test, didn't he?
Shame.
Yeah. Failed his theory test. I think in that press conference that you were in.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
How entertaining were the people here talking in riddles, like being silly?
Yeah, I know. Paul Mitchell's gone. Let's forget about him.
He's gone. Eddie's back. And Alanga's really... Look, I said this at the very start of the summer and I stand by it. There was a very restrictive Premier League list that Newcastle United were targeting. They wanted a goalkeeper, James Trafford. They wanted a right winger, Elanga. They wanted a hybrid number 10 striker cover, Joe Linton, different angle kind of player. The first went for Cunha, didn't work. Secondly, decided that Pedro was a similar type profile, different players but similar. Went for him, didn't happen. That was their kind of focus in that area. What was the other one? Centre half. It was still Gay at the very start of the summer, and in January it was. That's thinking has altered. If you've read any of my stuff on Newcastle World this week, I wrote a piece on. I broke that news that they totally cooled their interest in Mark Gay. He'd been scratched off the list, and they had been looking to do deals on the continent. I think they turned their attentions with centre half and that sort of forward position to see what value they can pick up on the continent. I don't believe. I mean, we're going to do a lot more of the transfer myth busting and talking towards later in the show, but I'll save a little bit for that.
Yes.
And what I was kind of segueing into was Elanga being the first choice. It's a deal for me that we have to timestamp this, as you were going to do.
Yes.
Friday.
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Obviously, we've been busy today. I don't think... Yeah, there's nothing that I've seen or heard that says it's done. But I think it will get done. And I think we wanted to talk about in the first half of the show the merits or demerits of what signing a player like
talk about it.
Anthony Elanga would be. And in the second half of the show, we'll go in depth a little bit more about busting some of those transfer myths. So if you do want to hear about the real story as to what's happened at Newcastle United this summer on a number of key targets, because all I've heard people, particularly other fan bases, say, the knock's different when it's Newcastle United. I missed this. What? No, there are stories people want to tell And there's the real story, and we've got the real story on some of that. Talk a little bit more about the budget and what I think Newcastle United have got to spend. The region, can't give a number, most people couldn't. But I know there's been some numbers thrown out there, and I don't think some of them are accurate from what I'm led to believe. And also we'll talk a little bit more about potential players and who they are looking at and who they like. Some of the names will be out there and some won't. So that'll be after the ad break halfway through. So Dom, I've done a lot of talking, you do a bit. Merits or demerits of Anthony Elanga?
Look, Anthony
Elanga.
Elanga.
Like it?
Yes, but with an asterisk. I mean, you can go back to a video we did earlier this summer where
I said he'd be perfect, didn't I?
Yeah.
I said I'm not mad on the player, but I think he's perfect for Eddie Howe.
I think I've got no doubt he'd be a good signing and fits in with what Newcastle want and offers something different to Brian Mbeumo, who was another option on that right-hand side, who is very much a cut-inside, left-footed type player. Anthony Elanga can go both ways. He's quite both-footed, really.
He's right-footed, but you wouldn't know it.
Yes.
Would you? Like you think he could be left-footed?
Yeah, and people question his end product, but end product, 6 goals, 12 assists last season, decent numbers. He's in and around that Jacob Murphy.
It was only Salah and Murphy, wasn't it, last season for more assists?
But that was part of my reservation in when I spoke about him last, where it was like, I don't think he's the massive upgrade on Jacob Murphy that 55 million or 60 million, as was initially sort of that ballpark fee discussed, that I just don't think he was maybe that much of an upgrade on Jacob Murphy. But what I would say is, at 23 years old, Premier League experience under his belt, he's done a good job at Forest the last 2 seasons under Eddie Howe, in a system with better players around him, arguably a better manager and system, more effective. He can really improve and I think become a £55 million player in time. And that's one thing Newcastle have done when they have went properly big on signings. I'm talking about the most expensive ones: Isak, Tonali, Anthony Gordon. Those are 3 players they've invested when they're around that 23-year-old, 21 Anthony Gordon, Isak 22, Tonali 23. Elanga would be 23, and every single one of those 3 players has improved since they joined Newcastle United, and I'd back Anthony Elanga to do the same. So in that respect, I can see why Newcastle are going for him. I think pace, power, end product as well, room to improve, long-term successor in that right wing position as well. I think there's a lot to like about him. I just would probably be a little bit cautious and say maybe a bit of patience will be required. If you expect him to come in and instantly be that hit the ground running 55 million massive improvement on Jacob Murphy, I think people might be a little bit underwhelmed. But I think in time, this is a player you just look. Sandro Tonali, Anthony Gordon, even Alexander Isak took months to make an impact at Newcastle, but all have come good in time. I'd back Anthony Elanga to do the same. I'd just say bit of patience.
I think it's very much how Eddie Howe works, though. That it is very difficult for players to walk straight in and have an impact.
Yeah,
you have to be able to learn the way that he works. It is. I think we've seen little highlights into that from some of the stuff Dan Burns said. He'd never got in the main video of that. I mentioned high performance last week. He never got in the main video, but it was one of the promos. Was him talking about the detail, and I do wonder whether that got cut when it was realised. I don't want you talking about detail. We know how protective Eddie Howe is over his work. He sees that as his life's work. He talked a lot when he took the job of translating it from paper into digital form. All of the plans and developing and constantly moving. He doesn't like us seeing his training sessions. He doesn't like anybody. This idea of like them being mic'd up, I can tell, and cameras being in, that will literally be, he will limit that to the most basic form it possibly can. He doesn't want anybody seeing his body of work, and that's nice. He's protective over what he does. But for that reason, it does take a lot of time for players to learn the playbooks on how he does things. So it will take Elanga a little bit of time. It would take James Trafford a bit of time. It would take any centre half, any forward, any of them. It will. But he likes small players. He likes them of a certain age, which is why most of the time he can virtually rule out everybody, I would say, over the age of 27. Doesn't tend to go for that kind of player. Likes to be able to mould, to change, while players are receptive and not too stuck in their ways. And I think go back to your point on expense. I think that's one thing that everybody looks at and says 60 million. What could you get with 60 million quid, which is what it'll end up being with add-ons, etc. And I genuinely think now, I think the market's very different to what it was even a year ago, 2 years ago, and I think that's the going rate now. So I look at the going rate for a winger. How much do Bournemouth want for Antoine Semenyo?
Yeah, it's more than 60, isn't it?
Yes, who's a couple of years older. Arguably doesn't have the same numbers, doesn't have the same output. How much do Brentford want for Brian Mbeumo? It's all the same.
His numbers are very good.
His numbers are very good, but it's all the same ballpark. And he's got 2 to 3 years on. I think he's 26 this year, Mbeumo. So he's got, like, Elanga's got that growth, that amount of growth. There's also the connections. He's obviously very good friends with Will Asura. He's obviously very good friends with Alexander Isak through the national connections. And there'll be others as well in the football world. It just feels like a real synergy. And one thing that I think they had to do is, I was hinting at it before, they weren't able to get the top targets in certain positions. I think as a statement to their own manager, they had to do this deal. You have to, and they might not. We had to timestamp it. It could all fall apart. It doesn't sound like it's going to. But they had to go and do this deal, and if they don't get this deal over the line, it isn't great. Like, it doesn't look good. Not when the manager wants him so much, and there's been a lot of effort. I took a lot of stick off Nottingham Forest fans this week on social media for suggesting that the player wants to move. That's my information. The player is absolutely sold. It's all sorted on that respect. It's just how much they're going to get Marinakis to bite on, and it sounds like it can be the 55 plus add-ons, but it'll be 60 really.
That's the thing, though. You can't. Everything has to align. You can't force a club to sell a player. So, in that respect, like, Nottingham Forest have come out and basically said, no, he's not for sale. We've rejected that initial bid. So, I think it's a very positive sign if Newcastle can get the deal done against such reluctant sellers. It just means probably overpaying a little bit. Although, going back to your point about Semenyo, players like that, you go back last summer and look at a player like Pedro Neto joined Chelsea, £55 million.
Yeah.
Injury-prone player. Look, I really like him. I think he's a really technically good, quality player.
End product lacking a little bit.
He got a lot of assists for Wolves, but I think he only got 2 goals his last season, only played 20 games, and that's a £55 million player. And older than Anthony Elanga. So I'd say maybe he is the going rate.
Probably is the going rate for a Premier
similar
League,
profile of players, I'd say.
Premier League experienced performers in those forward
outside
positions.
Of the traditional big
You've got to remember, in the way that modern football's transformed, they are almost the key positions in a football team. Where you had used to, your winger, as people would call them, would be the man who provided for the striker. Whereas now a lot of the time it's inverted, and wingers score a big section of goals. Hence why Mo Salah is top of the pile in the Premier League. It isn't always about the striker, so you do have to pay a premium for those kind of players. They do win you football matches, and I haven't really got a problem with it. What I would say, again, a couple of little points. Anthony Gordon, I feel, was more of a risk at the type of money. We didn't feel that at the time because it felt like a different financial climate. We didn't really have a true understanding of how much every penny meant. And it was like, well, if they waste 45 on him, does it matter? It was that kind of feeling, wasn't it? Whereas now we know how much it matters. But I would say Gordon didn't have the same kind of numbers coming from Everton.
No, definitely not.
And it was more, it felt
a little bit younger though.
Yeah, it was younger, but it felt more of a risk. This one feels like they're going to get a player who's going to come in and perform. And I think price tags is my second point. Price tags only ever really come into things when players don't play well. And as long as they give something and perform something, a role within the squad, the team, I don't really think the price comes into it all that much. But money isn't as free as some would suggest this summer, so it is important to spend that right.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited to see Anthony Elanga if that deal indeed comes off, and it goes ahead to Newcastle returning to pre-season training on Monday. I'd be surprised if any deal gets done before then, but we've always might. If he's through, Newcastle have a done deal, everything tied up. It takes them another week to announce.
Don't tweet it out though.
Yes, but it ties up to what we've been saying in all our videos, that 19th of July Celtic game. If we're seeing Anthony Elanga starting on that right wing, we're happy. James Trafford in goal, ideally another player as well. Then I think the stars are aligning in that
They are.
regard. After a slow start to the summer, it's been a case of quality over quantity. Eddie Howe has got his top target in mind. Newcastle are going for them almost at like sort of blinkered vision.
It's just a different approach, and it's one that I don't necessarily 100% agree with. It's one that it's one that he's married to and is going to stick with, and that's fine. I'm all right with that. It probably wouldn't be the way I would approach it. I think we've seen two totally juxtaposed sort of approaches. If you look at what Aston Villa tried to do and what Newcastle United tried to do, and I would probably be trying to mix a bit of both. That I still don't think, even with 3 absolute quality additions, I don't think Newcastle United have got the squad and the numbers to be able to sustain fighting on 4 fronts. With what, if you want to you balance things out, probably likely 10 games next season. Because they'll probably get through, you would hope, in that, you're the Champions League. And then, you probably get at least another tie. If obviously you get through, you get at least another tie. Might be more, but 10 games on top of everything that they potentially did last season. And Newcastle have become a club now, a team under Eddie Howe that regularly makes quarterfinals. So you're already playing a handful in one competition, a handful in another. It starts to mount up, and I don't think they've got the numbers.
Pushing 60 games seasons.
Yes, they haven't got the numbers, Dom. So I would have tried to do a bit more fiddling around, but they're not. They're just going quality. That's what they want. And look, I can't argue with it, because if you do add 3 quality players who improve your starting team, that starting team drops onto the bench, and it naturally strengthens your bench. But at one point they're going to have to start doing a bit of wheeling and dealing, and that's why I think I've took a bit of criticism. We've all had it. You got it from Murphy earlier in the summer. I got it from me suggestions on Barnes, like sort of getting rid of Harvey Barnes. That was said in the light of, if there is probably the most tradable player in Newcastle United's squad, as I look at it now, would be Harvey Barnes, a lad who wants to play first team football, by the way, so isn't the happiest lad sitting on the bench every week. And some would argue he should start ahead of Gordon. I think that's mad. I think I see the qualities of the 2 football players, and I think one is clearly a better footballer than the other, so I would start Anthony Gordon without even thinking about it. That doesn't mean I don't rate Harvey Barnes, by the way. I do think he's a decent player. But then when you look at what value you could probably get from him, because he's performed, because he's scored goals, he is a threat. If you imagine you put Harvey Barnes in any team in the Premier League, given the same game time, he will score goals. Great finisher. Top finisher.
One of the best at the club, really.
Average-ish winger at times. Struggles to beat his man, whatever. But he's did a great job. Great job for Newcastle at the end of the season.
He's an old school second choice striker, isn't he?
He's in a 4-4-2. He plays up front. He doesn't play on the wing, does he?
No.
He's in the olden days. He would have been at olden days. I bet there's people on here.
How far are you going back?
I know. I'm talking me old. But like your big man, small man. He's a small man every day, isn't he? Like in your front 2. But I look at him as probably, him and Joe Willock as probably the most. You could take Harvey Barnes out of Newcastle's squad, and does it weaken the squad? Yes, but does it weaken the team? Probably not. And it's the same for Joe Willock. Can we roll the dice, get some money in, and bring somebody else in and do a bit of wheeling and dealing? That's why I've sort of pinpointed those 2. Not necessarily because I think that I want them gone at all costs. I don't actually. I just more think there's scope there that you could get buyers for them, and you could get a bit of money back in, and you could use that elsewhere.
Yeah. Because Harvey Barnes, like you say, is in that age bracket where he's late 20s, approaching his late 20s. It's sort of like he's becoming not an Eddie Howe type player, because he probably signed just a little bit late with the injury and things like that. And look, I think Harvey Barnes has made a good impact like this last season, and
had a great season.
I'd say he had a better season than Anthony Gordon.
He did.
Certainly. So
I think he did as well. I'm just going off my
history.
And
the eye test.
It's the eye test we're talking about, isn't it? And look, everybody's got a different set of eyes. And that's why we love all your opinions on here.
Yeah.
We'll never take offence.
No. But do you want to have an ad break now, or is there anything else you want to touch on?
I don't know if I went much into what I think of Elanga. Well, I tell you one thing that I really do like about him, and everyone talks about pace this, pace that. Speed with the ball is very different to speed without the ball.
Yeah.
I've seen lots of players who are quick without the ball, put the ball at their feet and they run slower than me and you. But like, he is rapid with the ball, and that's a particular skill in itself. I think he could improve his defensive discipline, but I'm sure, like I say, he's working with the coaches at Newcastle who will bring that out in him. And it wouldn't surprise us still, even if they sign him and he isn't. Eddie Howe has been, he has done it before where he doesn't start people immediately. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise away from home at Aston Villa on the first day of the season if Jacob Murphy's still playing.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It would probably be more likely, isn't it? And then we'd see an Elanga off the bench if it gets done, which we think it is. We think it's going to get done. But I think it's a good time for the ads, isn't it?
Yes. Here is a word from our sponsors. Comply IT Limited. Worrying about disposing of your old IT equipment? Don't be. Comply IT handle everything. Secure collection, detailed tracking, and certified data destruction. That's Comply IT Limited. Four Rivers Financial Planning offer holistic financial advice for all stages of life, ensuring your plan remains robust and adaptable in the ever-changing world we live in. So yeah, those were our sponsors, links in the description below. And if you like what we do, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe and ring the bell for all your latest Geordie Journos content. We've been making these Saturday shows a regular fixture this summer and it's been quite hot in the response really that everyone has been given them, so we'll keep them coming. And we'll hopefully a bit more news next week, but you were wanting to quash a bit of news and speculation and provide some updates on the transfer front. We've talked about Elanga, everyone knows that, but now we're
Elanga, we've done that.
Digging a little deeper.
Yeah, I suppose we'll start on the budgets. I've seen a lot of numbers bandied about. I've seen 200 million and all sorts of people talking on social media. I don't know where it comes from, but that's not my understanding at all of when Newcastle United's budget is this summer. If it turns out to be that, I'll be the happiest man alive. I'd be happy to be wrong, but it's not the kind of numbers I've heard talked about. I think you're looking a little over half of that kind of number. I think they'll break 100, but it'd be a surprise if they broke 150. It would be a big surprise, and I think it would take sales to go anywhere near 150.
Yeah.
I think you're looking at 1 to 120, 125 probably. You can't say for definite, nobody said that number to me, but listening to all the conversations I've heard and things I've seen here, I think that's probably more a realistic number. It's always the PSR thing, isn't it, where people talk about, just go and do it. You know what, it's possibly where it comes from is theoretically they maybe could, with the way the numbers are stacked, but you've got to level with yourself on a 3-year cycle, 105 million losses. And if you push yourselves to the 105 million losses with every single time, you're going to be left with panics, and we can't spend for the next couple of years. If you have a huge loss this year, you're going to basically run up all of your potential losses over 3 years in that next sort of the rolling cycle, but the next 3 years will become really challenging until this dropped off. So I don't think it's the kind of numbers that people talk about. But on names, I've seen loads of different names. Loads of names bandied about this week. I brought the story, I don't know if I mentioned it in the first half, did I? Maybe did. Mark Gay, cool and interest in Mark Gay. I've seen the Scalvini links from really good source. I checked Scalvini out last week, and I don't think they're really very willing sellers at Atlanta, unless anything's changed in the last week.
No, not at all.
And the other thing I would say about it is I do know Newcastle United love him as a player, but I don't know if there's concerns about his speed, and also his injury record is really poor.
He's a bit of a Sven Botman regen, isn't he?
Botman, yeah, and I did see figures mentioned about 30 million things. Unless Atlanta are desperate to sell and have their own issues, I think that seems low.
For a 21-year-old Italy international, okay, he only played 8 games last season, but
they do love him. They do like him. It's not a case that they might be pivoting towards that, but what I'm led to believe is that, like I say, the search went onto the continent, so it could be that one. It could be the Argentine that friend of the channel Craig Hope mentioned recently.
Marseille,
yeah, it could be that. Although again, the age didn't maybe 100% fit in that one, but it looked like a bit of market opportunism the way that Craig had written that. So I don't know. I don't have any names, but I think there's a couple of deals that they're working on the continent that could come to fruition. And fingers crossed they do. But yeah, I think the Scalvini ones. It's if they love a player, you couldn't rule it out. But it just sounded unlikely. That's what I thought.
Yeah, like what I said about Elanga, you need everything to merge, and it doesn't sound like Atlanta want to sell him. But then also there's the injury concerns. But another player who we've discussed off camera and who has since moved elsewhere, but you can do a bit of myth busting on this, who Newcastle targeted was Dean Howson from
Yes.
Bournemouth. Obviously had the release clause, 50 million, since moved on to Real Madrid. I mean, 50 million for him in today's market, great value.
Yeah.
You can't compete with Real Madrid, really.
So no, that's exactly right. I think they thought they had him. I think they thought that was a one that they could have done, but we joke that's stupid saying from social media. Real Madrid's not really is rather loud, so like you say, you can't really compete with that. But I think they did a lot of work on that deal. They did a lot of work on the Delap deal.
Yeah.
And again, it was one of those where it's a footballing decision. Think about, we spoke about this. I think we must have spoke about this the day that he played at St James's Park, and it was true that if you look at where was he going to start and where was he going to play, I think the lad looked at Newcastle United and thought, Alexander Isak, I'm not going to play there. It wasn't. I don't think he went to Chelsea for the money. I think it was a footballing decision. And when you look at it, will I get a game ahead of Nicholas Jackson? Aye.
You'd back yourself.
Absolutely. I'd back you to get a game ahead of him. I rate him so highly.
I mean, most people could, because he's always suspended. So
yeah, he is. He's also trash.
yeah, fair enough.
In my opinion, of course, but I've never rated him from the minute I seen him. No. Who else was there? What else were we talking about? And Burmo.
Yeah.
So on that one, I've put it out on Twitter this week. His representatives are going around talking about 250 grand. That's where that number comes from. I wasn't the one to report that. I think it was various North East journalists. If I remembered, I'd be able to credit them. I can't remember who broke that. Was that Martin again?
Yes.
Martin Hardy.
Yeah, the Times.
Martin Hardy and the Times put £250,000 down. It is absolutely the figure. That's what he was walking around saying. If a Champions League club, because I think these talks, the way it sounded to me was these talks, these soundings out took place before the end of the season, and it was like, if you're a Champions League club, 250 grand. So Newcastle it would cost them 250 grand a week to take on and Burmo, whereas it's less for clubs outside. So I don't think he'll be on that at Man United, but we'll see. Delap and Burmo, Cunha, we've talked about that in the past. They did really like him. They went in for him, and again, it was just one of those things that it became quite clear that it wasn't going to happen. They didn't really go in for him and Burmo. They liked him, but the money is just such a turn off that it was never going to happen. I'm trying to think of any other. Pedro, true story about that would be that I think he made soundings that London was his preference quite early on, and you never know the full story with these things. It's easy for us to say, oh, we know X, Y and Z, and everybody will say the same thing, but you don't really know exacts. Sometimes you'll hear about these things after the event, and I do think with the Pedro one, Newcastle United backed out a little bit before everybody realised they'd backed out. I think they were out before then. I think Pedro could have happened because, again, Howe really, really liked him. That deal was done, as we've discussed on here. It was done 3 years ago, was it? And Eddie Howe pulled the plug on that, not because he didn't like the player, it was because he didn't think he had the standing to lead the line. In Callum Wilson's absence, so they went for Isak, and the rest is history. But with Pedro, I think that deal could have happened, but it was more reliant on Chelsea not biting. I think if Chelsea hadn't have come in by now, you might find that he could well have been a Newcastle United player. But like I say, I think they pulled out probably a little bit before, when everybody realised they pulled out. We could have even been doing videos, but this is what happens. You know, we're not at the coalface, we're not negotiators, but everybody was kind of talking about it, and I think it's probably already gone by then. And I think they all knew that it was just a matter of time. And the player, don't be daft. He was always going to keep his options open. Yeah, you're not going to,
especially so early in the window.
Yes, you're not going to burn any bridges.
Yeah.
But I've seen other names linked on. I've seen a lot of the in the nose this week talking about Sunset, a lad from
Bilbao.
Bilbao, rubbish. Not even a. It doesn't sound like it's even a conversation. I see all of these fans putting, is it Xavi Simons or Simons from Leipzig? Into that little, when we talk about the little, he's the little midfielder or winger or whatever.
Reports from Germany linked him.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it a reputable?
Builder.
Was it? No. So I can tell you that. No.
Well, I did a piece on it where it was, Builder reported that Newcastle are interested, and then also reported that Xavi Simons doesn't want to sign for Newcastle, so they've sort of cancelled their own story.
Yes.
Which some journalists do like to do.
They do. Yeah, it happens. I mean, if we were dealing with that, we probably would have waited the next day at least to cancel our own story, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Such is the
all
need.
part of the fun.
Yeah, but no, he's a no. Plenty of other names. I think there are names out there that haven't been linked in the press, or hadn't been at least until recently. I don't know if some of the most recent last couple of days, particularly like I say the one that Hopey did. I don't know. I've not heard that, but I know there was a couple of names centre half and forward that weren't already out there. That I think they felt good about the deals. Look, they felt good at times when I was listening, sort of trying to get answers. Felt good about Pedro at times, but such is life. They feel really good about Elanga and they feel really good about Trafford, so we can only take their word for it.
Is the Hawaii bubbling?
I know it's been a long time since we actually proposed
we coined that phrase and then have basically not used it since. Hawaii soon.
Hawaii! I'm ready for it, me, like.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
We should clip it up.
Yeah. Just in case.
I might do a short. Like,
Okay.
if something happens, I might do a short.
Anthony Elanga. Hawaii. It's a Hawaii soon.
Hawaii soon, aye. It might happen. It will happen. I think it'll happen. I can't say for definite I'm not doing the deal, but I think it'll happen. And I think it'll happen quite soon. I think we'll find the same with Trafford as well, even though, like I say, it hasn't been a straightforward. That's another thing a lot of the in the know seem to be talking about at the minute is it's a really difficult, like those two deals, the reason why they're difficult is because of add-on, the clauses with Manchester United for Elanga and Manchester City with Trafford. That I'm led to believe is not a sticking point at all in negotiations.
Right.
Not at all. So, like I say, I've always said it on this channel, other channels, in my writing, whatever we do. Me and Dom stand here, and Jordan as well. He's busy today, we couldn't quite make it. We will never ever like bull you out there.
Might have to beep that,
maybe.
but okay.
We never will. Like if we can give you some information, we will, and we'll never join the dots up and make things up and give them fluff and think, oh well, that's probably. We'll tell you if we've heard that or we know it. We'll tell you, and we'll always give. If we can't tell you the nuts and bolts of a deal, we'll give you our opinions on it, and that's what you'll always get from us, honest opinion. And I wouldn't be saying the things, and you wouldn't be saying the things today that we are without having sourced that information and knowing exactly what it is. So we'll never stand here and say we know everything. Which sometimes when you say some things, people think you're going to know everything. That's not the case. That's almost impossible to be in that position.
People like to try and sound like they know everything.
Yes. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is some people out there will tell you they know everything. We're not saying that. We'll never say that. But we hear bits. We know bits and bobs, and we'll always try and get that across to you guys in these videos and in your content on the Shields Gazette, NUFC section, check out for Dom, and of course on Newcastle World as well, myself and Jordan.
Obviously, just before we finish, want to shout out the Brandlin again. We've just turned up today, we haven't even...
Yes.
We just said, can we do a video please? And they went, yes, have the upstairs room, brilliant. And the Brandlin does show your continental football, your Women's Euros, your World Cup next year, so if you're wanting to watch the Women's Euros today on Saturday, come to the Brandlin. That's what they're pushing, and good place to watch the football. I'll watch the Euros here, I'll watch the World Cup here. Good place to watch the football.
One of your favourite pubs, isn't it?
Yes. So, just a shout out.
Good food, good drink, good company. It's always been a top place. Gosforth High Street, I like it, we like it. Come to the Brandlin.
Friend of the channel.
Right, we've waxed lyrical enough about the place where we are here today. Anything else to add?
No, Newcastle back in training next week. We should get plenty of talking points from that.
Yeah,
see you probably next week, maybe even the same place. Or if there's something to talk about in the meantime, we'll be sure to do a video on that. Newcastle obviously back in training on Monday. And yes, thank you for watching. Myself, Dom Skur, Liam Kennedy, Brandlin Arms. And we'll be back in our next Geordie Journos video. Thanks for watching.